as we are joined by Jon Chepkevich, founder of rookiescale.com. Jon has been in the throes of all of the draft process, the combine, and things like that. Jon, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Let's start here, Jon. We've heard this since the beginning of this draft process, with this draft being one of the weakest, and I think the last 25 years is what we've heard. Is it really, I don't want to say that bad, but I don't know if there's another term to say, or has it been a little bit overstated as we see some names starting to rise up the list? And Chris and I always talk about how Giannis was in a draft that, wasn't supposed to be that good. So is it starting to look a bit better than people initially thought?
I think so, yeah. I think the bad draft name that's been dubbed to it is a little bit overstated. I think what people are thinking about is the top 7 or 8 or so prospects aren't quite as enticing as you might expect with the star power that you typically see draft to draft. Usually there's an obvious 1, 2, 3 guys that you feel pretty confident about. This draft feels like it's starting off at typically pick number 7 or 8 in a normal draft. But then I think after that, there's a fair amount of depth and interesting role players that can be had.
Jon, I'm curious. I mean, I'm not sure your exact feelings on Zach Edey, but he's definitely been, I would say, the most polarizing figure, especially at least from this draft class. It seems like people are either all in on him and think he can be a potential star or at least a starter, an impact player in this league. And then I think there's some people who just say he's too big in today's league. Yeah, I just can't see it happening. First off, where do you fall on Zach Edey? And second off, I mean, I hear a lot of people say these days, don't tell me about what they can't do. Tell me about what they can do. What is it that you see, regardless of how you feel on him? What do you see Zach Edey contributing at an NBA level?
I would say I fall more on the optimistic side of the equation, especially in this draft. He's one of the better college basketball players of the past 25 years ever. He's been so productive, so good. I understand the worries about his style of game translating, big guys like that in the modern NBA and everything. But we've seen a little bit of a resurgence of bigs of late. So I think, having a guy like him, I think my boss, Jonathan Gavoni, recently had some comments saying, imagine Jonas Valanciunas, but make him, 5 or 6 inches taller, right? I think there's a spot for a guy like that to come in off the bench, crush some second units, be a total mismatch in those circumstances. Maybe he only plays 18 to 20 minutes per game, but I think he can be pretty valuable in those minutes.
Talking to Jon Chepkevich, founder of rookiescale.com, also does some work with Draft Express. And like we said, Jon has been in the throes of all this. Jon, on the show, I've been very, very high on Tidjane Salaun, okay? And I need to know, for the Kings situation as they're trying to get back into the playoffs, does Tidjane Salaun feel too raw for what the Kings are trying to accomplish, or is there something there? I know he's a bit younger, but is there something there, or do you think he's a bit too raw for the Kings situation?
I think there's something there. This is a guy I've been pretty intrigued by dating back to the preseason as just did I think he was going to be a lottery pick or a top 10 pick in this draft? Maybe not, but I thought he had some upside to potentially achieve that with him being 6'10" in shoes, almost 220 pounds, almost a 7'2" wingspan, a 9'2" standing reach. Like, these are great measurements, and the raw tools are definitely there. It's a little bit more of a swing, but I think that if he makes it to 13, which I'm not quite sure that he will at this point, I think that's a worthwhile one for Sacramento to take a look at.
Jon, I'm curious. It seems like we've been tracking mock drafts for really, it feels like a month and a half, 2 months. I'm sure you've done more in-depth stuff than that, but it seems to me like, at least from the mock draft perspective, Devin Carter has really taken a massive rise over this process. I mean, when we were first initially looking at mock drafts, maybe a month and a half ago, he was late teens, maybe early 20s. And now then he was, kind of in the Kings range at 13. There was a solid week where it felt like every mock draft had the Kings taking Devin Carter. And now you look at mock drafts and it seems like he's pretty firmly in that top 10. Why do you think he has risen so much during this process?
I think he's a guy who prior to this year, he didn't really shoot it at all. And he has a really wonky, funky looking jumper. So, with him being a guard and not being really able to shoot, he was kind of more off the radar. But this year, things definitely changed on that front. Like he had a huge shooting explosion this season, became way more confident off the dribble, off the catch. I think he took maybe almost 7 threes a game at almost 38% from three, where prior to that he was sub 30%, right? So, there are some worries as to how sticky that improvement is, how real that is. But when you look at how good of an athlete he is, like I think he set a new record for the 3/4 court sprint at the combine. He had like a 42-inch vertical. Like he's a total stud athlete. His dad played in the NBA and is a coach on the Memphis Grizzlies, so he has good bloodlines. There's just a lot to like. I remember watching a game, Oklahoma against Providence this year, is when he really jumped out to me and I was sold. He just did a few things defensively that nobody else in this class can do. I remember him running through a stagger screen, flying through 2 guys and blocking a 3-pointer. Like he's just really locked in, really cares, really about the right stuff. And I think he's a pretty safe bet to add some value defensively. And if the shooting sticks, he could be one of the better players in this class.
Talking to Jon Chepkevich, rookiescale.com and Draft Express. Jon, we've been hearing that Ron Holland is slipping a little bit. What have you been hearing? I know Chris and we fired up his highlights, and there's a lot of dunking, but I know there have been some question marks as far as his shooting and things like that. Really, the G League Ignite in general, and they're shut down now, but some questions as to how these guys were developing. What have you been hearing about Ron Holland, who I think he's been on the last 5 mock drafts for the Kings, so we're really trying to figure out what we'd be getting with Ron Holland.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who coming into the season was thought of as potentially being the number 1 or number 2 pick in the draft. He has a lot of pedigree going back to high school at Duncanville and with Team USA at the U17 World Cup. And, he has a lot to fall back on with his competitiveness and his winning pedigree in high school. Obviously, that got thrown through the ringer in the context of the G League Ignite, who didn't do a lot of winning this year. Mm-hmm. I think just some of his warts were put on display this year with the lacking shooting, some questionable feel on both ends of the floor, and just maybe the fact that for what he's supposed to be or what you'd like him to be, maybe his frame is a little underwhelming for this guy that you want to be this like physical presence, right? So I think once you get to 13 for Sacramento, it could be a guy that, if he gets in there and he's able to kind of right some of the wrongs and, get going in the right direction, he could exceed that 13th pick slot and value. But I think there's a lot of variance there, and it's possible he could potentially even slide past Sacramento.
Tristan Da Silva is somebody who's kind of grown to be my favorite pick for the Kings at 13. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't seem to be rising up draft boards in the same way, like I described kind of Devin Carter. It seems like, not a lot of mocks have him even at 13. A lot of them have him going kind of in that 17 to early 20s. Why do you think that is, that he's not rising? And do you like him as a pro potentially?
He might not be rising because he's not like a sexy pick or a sexy player. He's not overly talented. He doesn't have a ton of upside, but he's 6'9", versatile, has good feel on both ends, can really shoot the ball. Like the past few years, he's been hovering close to 40% from 3. And he's just a guy that, has gotten consistently better. He wasn't some super highly touted prospect, early in Germany until his brother started playing really well, who was with Stanford and now is in the EuroLeague. And I think something clicked in him like, hey, I can do this. I can follow my brother's footsteps. And he's just put in the work and gotten better and better and better over time. But I think he's just not perceived as being a high ceiling guy because he's 23 years old, not some super athlete, right? But I think he is a kind of plug and play valuable role player from the get-go.
Jon Chepkevich, rookiescale.com and draftexpress.com. Jon, this has been awesome. Before we let you go, who do you have the Kings taking? And this could be the same question. Who would you take if you were the Kings?
Oh, man. I would say that if Salaun gets there, I do like that.
Let's go.
I do like that as an option. I think he's really interesting. He fills a need if he hits his ceiling. I'm gonna roll with that. Let's go Salaun. If he gets there, that's the move.
There you go, Jon. Well, you have just found a way to become a friend of the show. We will definitely have you on again. Yeah. Go check out all of Jon's work. Go check him out on social media. He's a great follow. Jon Chepkevich, rookiescale.com, draftexpress.com. Jon, thank you so much. And I guess you'll get to relax a little bit after the draft happens. I know you've been running all around, so enjoy yourself in about 28 hours.
Thanks, guys. Good luck to the Kings. Interested to see who they pick.
Thank you so much. That was Jon Chepkevich, founder of rookiescale.com, also does work for draftexpress.com. Coming up next, we